So contrary to the thumbnail, this video is actually going to be very low production and very chill. I actually recorded this video for my students inside of Hire.js and just figured it might be valuable for other people. So if you do find it valuable, make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment, and come and join us in the free school group that we have for Hire.js. Come get clarity on your career, on what you need to do to break in as quickly as possible. It's something that I'm really, really passionate about. But yeah, without further ado, here is a very uncool, low production video of me talking about my upcoming opportunity to interview with Meta. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Meta, previously Facebook, they're the company behind Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, and some other things as well. One of the big names in big tech, and one of the companies that has this kind of rigorous interview process that's a little bit mystical if you've never gone through it. So what I figured I'd do is just kind of give you sort of some journaling with regards to how this experience goes for me, the way I prepare, and sort of what my mindset is as I'm going through this process. So we can see here, I'm in my career profile. And my screening interview is coming up in a couple days here. This is just the first step, essentially. And basically, if I pass this screening, big if there, then I will be invited to a virtual on-site interview, which is essentially similar to a screening interview, but it's like 4 or 5 of them stacked up back to back with different interviewers. And so it's much more intensive, and the preparation is more intense as well. But yeah, that's pretty much how the process goes. You have a conversation with the recruiter, which I've already done this. The recruiters are always really nice, and it's always really chill. You know, no big deal. And then this screening interview, this is the first, this is the first point in time when you're actually you're tested technically. On your coding skills and your problem solving ability. So this is sort of the first thing that you really need to make sure that you are preparing for. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how I'm going to do that. And then from there, if I'm invited to the next phase, the preparation strategy changes a little bit. So let's just talk through this. I'm going to go over to my Excel here. And this is a very kind of off the cuff video. Thank you for your patience. I'm just sort of walking through this. It's a little bit last minute, but I hope that it's valuable to you. So let's just talk about preparation methodology. But before I get into that, I want to just mention a few different things. First off, I know that I've worked in big tech and I've passed multiple big tech full screening loops, or not just the screening, but like the actual loops where you go through all of them. That said, I've also failed screenings and I've failed loops. So both of those are true. So this is not in the bag necessarily, okay? I think it'll be a really interesting experience. I've never had the opportunity to interview at Meta before, and I've always wanted this opportunity, so I'm really excited about it. But there are a lot of factors that go into your success with these sorts of opportunities, okay? The way that I typically break it down is it's 10% luck, 40% preparation, and 50% experience. That might make some people mad. I'm sure people have different opinions on this, but I found that, depending on what questions you get and what interviewers you get, that has a lot to do with your success. That's just sort of the nature of it. 40% is preparation, so obviously making sure that you're doing the right technical preparation and also mindset preparation. They're both equally important, I would say. And I would say if you neglect one or the other, you're screwed. So we'll talk about that in a little more detail. But that's 40%, I would say. And then 50% experience. I have not gone through this process as a no experience early career coder, okay? Basically, that's probably going to look more like general hiring. So just hiring for a general software engineer position. That is not what I'm doing here. I'm actually interviewing specifically for a front-end role. So think web development, HTML, CSS, React, DOM, all that stuff. So it's a little bit different. And as you gain experience in your career, the preparation's different, and the process is a little bit different as well. And sort of what your expectations for the interviews are, it changes. That said, though, you will get a lot of the same types of questions as an early career coder trying to get in with general hiring, but it's going to be a little bit more focused on computer science fundamentals, theory, algorithms, stuff like that. Not necessarily stuff you learn and drill down if you're computer science school. You can learn all that stuff outside of a computer science degree, but it is a very specific kind of skill set to the big tech interview process. Let me just say, I have friends who they're 10 out of 10 coders. They're really, really good at their jobs. They're amazing professionals who don't move forward in screenings. I myself have not moved forward for screenings before. So that's just the reality. It's a little bit of a numbers game. And most recently, I actually have a couple friends who didn't make it past this first screening round. So for Meta, it's tough. It's really, they have the best of the best coming in, wanting to apply for positions at Meta. So it comes down to, again, sort of that 10-40-50 split of a number of different factors that get you through that process. And then obviously, like I said, this is not in the bag. I've had lots of success in this process, but I haven't had 100% success across the board. So let me just talk about sort of what my mindset is going into this and how I am going to prepare. And I think this is where a lot of the value is going to be for people watching this. The first thing that I always tell people, this is so, so important, okay? Whenever you're preparing for, I would say, any interview, not just in big tech, you really do not want to practice things that you're already 100% comfortable with. And this is tough because you already are feeling anxious. You want, as you are practicing your interviews, if you're feeling anxious, then it can sort of be a mental blocker. Like, okay, I need to sort of give myself, and maybe you don't say this to yourself explicitly, but you might think it subconsciously. You want to try to give yourself a boost of confidence by practicing something that you're already comfortable with. I get that. I totally understand that. And I've been there, but that is not going to help you. So you really need to sort of square up to this reality that if you're going to be interviewing effectively, especially for sort of a next level position, you need to be practicing things that make you feel uncomfortable and give you that, whatever that feeling is in your body, that physical response, or I don't know, maybe you don't have a physical response when you're feeling anxious, but I know I sure do. I get like, my throat kind of seems to swell up a little bit and I sort of feel a little bit sick in my stomach. So it's like butterflies, but if you're also a little bit queasy, it's not a pleasant feeling at all. But I know that I have to be squaring up to that feeling and I have to be practicing that feeling as I'm preparing for my interviews, because that's going to be the thing that gives me the confidence to move forward and push through those feelings with confidence when I sort of come up against that anxiety in the interview. And let me tell you, you could go into an interview with all the confidence in the world, and all it takes is getting a curveball thrown at you, some kind of question that you weren't expecting, some kind of, and it doesn't even have to be a technical question. It could be a behavioral question that you just weren't prepared for, okay? You have to practice that feeling and have a plan for what you're going to do when that happens. And that's really, if I were to sort of boil down my approach to preparing for interviews, that's it, okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about sort of in detail what that means, but that's the first thing I'll tell you is if you're sort of gravitating towards questions that you're already comfortable with, both behavioral and technical questions, in your interview preparation, I promise you, you're not going to do as well as you could have done if you would have squared up to those emotions earlier. And more than likely, it's going to negatively affect your interview performance to the point where, your interview probably won't be inclined. That's just the reality. So you want to be prepared to have those feelings in the interview and perform through those feelings. So do not practice questions that you're 100% comfortable with. But at the same time, you don't want to overload yourself. If there's a question, you also don't want to be practicing questions where you have no idea how to start, okay? If you get one of those questions in the interview and you just are totally lost, that means you're not prepared for the role from an experience perspective. And that's okay. You can still try to, you can try to save face in that moment and you can still walk through your process. But at a certain point, you kind of need to know, you have to have a gauge on, where is your skill level at, okay? So it's this balance when you're practicing. You want to practice questions that challenge you, but you want to practice questions that are in your wheelhouse, because ultimately that means that the job is in your wheelhouse, okay? Another thing here, and this is sort of just repeating what I said earlier, you have to practice the feelings, okay? One thing I'll talk about in a little more detail in the second video, but we'll talk about it a little bit here as well. I have a randomizer. Whenever I'm doing interview practice, I have a randomizer pick my questions for me. And it picks both the initial question and a random follow-up question, okay? So even though I'm picking the questions, I don't know which one's coming, and I don't know which follow-up's coming, okay? That gives me that ability to sort of simulate those feelings of anxiousness and to step through my process as I'm practicing, okay? So that's sort of a practical way that has helped me do this. The next part that's really important is stepping through a process. I'm not going to talk in detail about my process for approaching behavioral and technical questions in this video. I will do that a little bit in the next video, so video 2 of 3, which you'll see what that is when we get to the bottom of these notes here. The next thing, practice everything out loud, okay? I would say probably for the week following, leading up to your screening interview, whenever you're sitting in front of your computer writing code, pretend that there's an interviewer there in front of you and be explaining your thought process, okay? It's gonna seem silly at first, but you need to be doing this, okay? Because when you get to the interview, the worst thing that you can do is lock up. And I've done this before. I've locked up in interviews before, okay? It's okay. I think it happens to everybody, and sometimes you have to go through an experience like that to help you realize that, okay, I wasn't preparing in the right way, or I need to change my approach, okay? So this happens to the best of us. So if you do lock up in your interview, it's not the end of your career. It's a step in the right direction. You're realizing, what it actually takes to move forward, okay? But you need to be practicing everything out loud. You need to be getting comfortable articulating. Articulating is a huge part of having a successful career, especially in big tech, especially at bigger companies that have a more stringent hiring process. And it's just a good thing to practice in general. But you don't want to get trapped in your head. You don't want to spin. All of those things are totally natural and normal, but you really want to be practicing everything out loud and getting that thought process within your step-by-step, right? And again, I'll show you that in the next video. But you want to be getting it out in the open. And I will actually, even interviews that I've passed and have been successful on, I will notice myself freezing where my brain is spinning and I'm taking a second. Even in those moments, I've trained myself to say, here's what I'm thinking about. Here's what I'm going back and forth between in my mind. Even though my mind doesn't want to do that, I just want to shut down and be quiet. That really helps. And it actually often, speaking and articulating those thoughts out loud will actually help you find clarity, okay? So really, really important. Practice everything out loud, okay? The other thing I'll say here before we get into sort of the specific technical areas that I'm going to be preparing on. Hold on. We want to not necessarily practice passing tests or getting it to work in something like HackerRank. Okay. If your metric for success in your interview preparation is passing tests or getting it to work, like all the tests are green and everything works and you got it to pass, I don't think that is the best. That is the best measurement of success in your interview practice. The reason for that is often in your interviews, you're not going to be running tests, like actual automated tests. Rather, your interviewer will have you step through your code yourself. So you literally going line by line and stepping through exactly, and I'm going to show you that in the process. That's a really critical part. But you need to practice that. Okay, not necessarily if you're spending all your time and getting all hung up on getting in HackerRank all your tests to be green. There are some companies that require that, but I'm telling you, just from like a percentage perspective, especially if you're having a face-to-face interview with a live interviewer and you're not going through just like a HackerRank that's like pass-fail, getting your code to be all green is not going to be something that you want to practice necessarily, because there's all this other stuff that you need to practice instead. You need to practice the mindset. You need to practice the process. You need to practice the articulation. Okay, that's going to be the biggest measurement of success, and practicing the feelings as well. Okay, so that's one final note here. I forgot to write it down, but I just remembered it. So, okay, so let's talk about sort of what I'm going to be preparing and sort of the types of technical focus areas. And one thing I'll mention, this is for a front end position, SITION, not necessarily indicative of general software engineer hires. Okay, engineer hires. Okay, I am specifically interviewing for let's see here, front-end software engineer role. Okay, what does that mean? That means that yes, there are going to be data structure and algorithm questions. So those are those computer science theory questions that everyone gets really scared of, and it's sort of like its own skill set. And I would say it is. These computer science fundamentals. The context of these questions, though, are more than likely, this isn't a guaranteed thing, but more than likely, from a statistical perspective, they're going to be related to the front end in some capacity. You're going to be working with some kind of like DOM tree traversal, some kind of, and I need to add one here. I need to add recursion. Maybe like a recursive React component is one that I've seen. Maybe sorting for something that's on the front end, which if I do get a sorting question, I'm screwed because I suck at sorting. And by the way, that kind of goes back to this luck thing. Like sometimes there's just things that you're bad at, and like if you get if you get a question that's heavily focused on that thing, you're not going to get it, and that's just part of it, and it's okay. I should probably do a deep dive on sorting and getting better at that, but for now, I know that I have a limited amount of time. So learning a brand new thing, or I should not necessarily learning a brand new thing, but becoming efficient and proficient at a thing that I'm previously bad at, I don't have time to do that, okay? What I do have time to do is get sharp on the stuff that I know is in my wheelhouse, okay? And then again, the rest is sort of up to that split. So this is a front end position. If you were applying for a general software engineer role and you were getting interviewed as a general software engineer, you're not going to have the JavaScript questions. You're not going to have the DOM tree questions. It's probably going to mostly be coding puzzles and coding challenges within the data structures and algorithms sort of sphere. Okay, so there's probably better people to talk to in regards to landing a position like that. That is, I think, like, grinding leak code, but grinding the leak code in a way where you're still articulating and you're still practicing the feelings and you're still stepping through the process. Okay, but this is a front end position, so I know that there's going to be a lot of JavaScript questions. Okay, and we can even look here. If I go to this prep document, and this will for my students, you're actually going to notice some things in here that I've emphasized before. Write code in a simple text editor. All right, so this kind of goes to my point, like, don't try to pass fail, right? And make sure that you're working without any kind of auto completion. You want to make sure that you're able to comfortably type code and write code, especially when you're at my level. I have a decade of experience. I'm not an entry level engineer anymore, so it's important for me to be able to efficiently be able to type. And that takes 5, 6, 7 years to get to that level where you can, not be looking at your hands and be sort of writing JavaScript code and doing that efficiently and proficiently. And it's okay if you can't do that today. But where I'm at in my level, it's important. Okay. Practicing under pressure, timing yourself. Let me actually go add this. This is really, really important. Practice everything out loud, and you need to have a timer running at all times. You need to see how long things are taking you. This is crucial. Time management is crucial, okay? You need to have a timer running at all times. And tomorrow, I'll talk a little bit about how you want to manage time. But regardless, if you're practicing behavioral questions, so, tell me about a time when or a coding question, time management is important, okay? So that's the other thing I need to add here. Sorry, I forgot it earlier. Let me go back to this document. Do as many coding questions as you can. Yep, it's great. Simple code editor, ramp up your speed. Yeah, so gotta practice with the timer on, and that's gonna help you. That's gonna increase that simulation of those feelings. You need that, okay? Here's one thing that I hope my students will kind of recognize. If you've only worked with UI libraries before, like React, right? Spend some time trying to learn the raw DOM APIs. If you've used a utility library like Lodash, try to implement some of its methods from scratch. Check how well your solutions work with large inputs and think about memory consumption and the edge cases you need to handle. So the first part here, working with pure vanilla DOM APIs and vanilla JavaScript, is a huge, huge part of your success within a big tech front-end interview. So that's why I see people, they kind of go straight to React and they don't necessarily understand how it works under the hood. Those people really struggle if they try to interview as a front-end engineer in big tech. So you really, really, really want to make sure that you are efficient in this stuff. And also with basically any and all JavaScript, let's see, I think they set it up here. HTML, JavaScript, CSS, but they want you to focus on the computer science stuff. Yep, that makes sense. The primitives, they mentioned primitives. Maybe not in this document, maybe it's another document I saw. But basically all JavaScript language primitives. Did they mention anything about scoping in here? Scope. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Show proficiency in JavaScript language and its primitives. This is what I was looking for. I spaced out there for a second. I was looking for this. So iteration, closures, scope, asynchronous code. This is stuff. If you're watching this video for the first, you probably know what iteration is, but closures and scope, like that might be a little scary. These are sort of these advanced. I wouldn't necessarily call them advanced JavaScript features, but language features of JavaScript that you can go a long time without fully understanding why they work or how they work in your career. But eventually, you need to know it, and you need to know it well. So that's also really important as a front-end engineer. You're going to get drilled on this stuff. You can't just sort of have like a theoretical, understanding of sort of kind of how it works. Maybe you need to be really specific. So that's the other thing from a technical perspective. And I think I listed some of that out here in my Excel draw. Yeah, so scoping, call, apply, bind, classes, timers, caching, implement helper methods from scratch. So that's like the Lodash thing. What else did they say? Scratch. What else did they say in here? What else can we add? Closure, scope, asynchronous code. Yeah, so async. Okay, it's all fair game. And then let's talk a little bit about, before we wrap this video up, so what about the data structures and algorithms? So like what can you sort of expect as a front-end engineer? Again, breadth first, depth first, DOM traversal is very, very common. You might even get like some kind of question that doesn't even mention the DOM. It just, you're asked to like traverse a tree. But they might say like traverse a tree kind of like the DOM, or because the DOM is obviously maybe not obvious to you, but as you learn, what data structures are, it will become very clear to you really quickly. Like the DOM is a tree, so the way that query selector is implemented under the hood, document.querySelector or document.getElements by tag name. The way that that's implemented under the hood is with a breadth first or depth first traversal algorithm, probably written in C, right? So probably it's abstracted, it's under the hood, and it's written, in a lower level language, so it's really fast, okay? Recursion is a big part of what I see in front-end big tech interview questions. And this is interesting because in terms of like React components, or like building React components, or just any sort of UI library component, I will often see that paired with some kind of recursive element. So one question I've seen a lot is build a React component that displays a file tree and a list of files and folders, and you can continue to open folders in that subtree an unlimited amount of time. So that question is a recursive question, kind of disguised as a React question. So that's important. Sorting, hopefully I don't get one of those, but I haven't seen sorting as much. There might be a question about the performance of sorting. So that's why I need to be practicing and brushing up on my familiarity with Big O. Graph traversal, this is one that I'm a little new with, but is something that I've started to warm up to, and I know that Meta specifically, at least from what I've read and from what I've heard, graph traversal, which is pretty similar to tree traversal. Graph traversal and adjacency lists is something that can come up in interviews. So I want to make sure that I'm practicing those. And then common algorithmic patterns for general code solving. So sliding window is one of them, multiple pointers. I'm not going to get into what all of these are, but just kind of your basic sort of algorithmic patterns that are a little bit introductory, but very, very common for technical interviews. And then the last thing is the performance of any given algorithm. This is referred to as Big O, or you'll sometimes hear space, or time complexity. Okay, so understanding the space complexity or the memory complexity, how much memory a certain function call takes up, and the time complexity of what a certain, how long a certain function takes to complete. Again, these are skills that you can learn The way that I learned these skills actually was not through like grinding leak code. I actually took, I think Colt Steele has a JavaScript algorithms Udemy course. Let me see if I can find it. Steele algorithms. I think it's this one. Yeah, okay, so Colt Steele is a man. He rocks. I love this guy. And maybe you're familiar with him, but he literally has like this, like you can go pick this course up right now for $18. And you basically, it's like if you have no idea about like what are data structures and algorithms, you know, how can I do that in JavaScript? What's big O complexity? He breaks all that down in this course. So I'm not a big like paid course kind of guy, but I think this is a very specific thing and you want to be focused when you're learning this stuff. So if you are interested in going down this path in earnest, it is a long-term goal. You're not going to just magically pick this stuff up in 30 days, right? But I think this would be this is how I learned data structures and algorithms. And you know, I've had lots of success getting through big tech interviews. So check that out. Let me just close this and come back here. That's pretty much it for this first video. I hope this was enlightening to you or gave you some kind of insight on my process and how I'm going to go about preparing for this stuff. And then there's going to be 2 more videos coming in this series. The second video is going to be sort of a sampling of the questions I end up picking out and drilling. And then I'm going to show you my step-by-step process for, you know, when an interview presents me with a prompt or a question, what my process is for stepping through that and moving forward with that question. And I'll obviously be practicing that process as I pick up when I pick up those questions. And then the third video is going to be a retrospective on how that screening goes. If I don't do well, why I think I didn't do well, what I was missing, and sort of what my impressions of the interview experience was like. And then, you know, we'll just talk about sort of, I guess, you know, anything else that comes up or anything else that I want to mention. And if it does happen to move forward into an additional round, we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about, you know, what my process is going to be like preparing for that and how much time I'm going to give myself and so on and so forth. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this. This ended up being a little bit longer than I thought it would be, but I hope it's helpful to you. Shoot me a message if you have any questions. And if you're not a part of a Hire.js, if you're not a part of the school group, come join us. You know, it's a free group. There are paid students that I work with within the Hire.js group, but we have discovery calls every other week on Wednesdays. And you're more than welcome to come to those and ask any questions about, you know, interviewing in big tech or breaking into your career or freelancing or just kind of getting any clarity on your direction. So make sure to join us there. Or if you're just really, really dedicated to breaking into this career as quickly as possible, I'll also post a link to a funnel where you can go through it and book a call with me, and we can talk about how I can help you. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this, and I will see you in the next one.